What's up, guys? Also Footballtalk here, back on YouTube after 3 weeks off. I've been grinding film of NFL draft prospects this entire time, and well before that even, in order to present my top 10 rankings at each position with extremely detailed scouting reports. You can check those out at hellofootballtalk.com. I put the link in the video description if you want to check them out. I really think there's nothing like it, out there for free at least, and if you enjoy the content, leaving a like here on the video, subscribing to my YouTube channel, and or follow me on social media, and most importantly, letting a couple of your friends know would all be greatly appreciated. But now, what do we have coming up in this video? I've now evaluated around 200 prospects in this class and plan to go well beyond 300. And of course there's guys I don't like as much as the consensus boards would suggest, while falling in love with others who don't receive the recognition they deserve, I believe. And those are the names that I want to focus on here. I'll be working my way through every single position and trying to light on one player I just really enjoyed watching. That could be a guy fairly high on the board, but not up to where I see them. Or because I'm a sicko, some random names that you've probably never even heard before, and maybe announced by an orangutan or other zoo animal sometime on day 3. Either way, just sit back, relax, and listen to me wax poetic about these prospects. Since there were so many to choose from, I'll make sure to add another name or two at the end of each position. But now let's get this baby started, and of course quarterback is how we get the ball rolling. And the name I want to discuss here is Haener from Fresno State, 6 foot flat, 205 pounds, a redshirt senior. To me, the first part of the quarterback class is pretty defined, with the top 4 names in Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. Then you very much have Hendon Hooker in a tier by himself, and after that it's kind of a wasteland, with a couple of talented passes worthy of taking a swing at, along with a few not so exciting guys who can maybe stick around as backups. Haener is the one player that I really like beyond the top 5. He actually started his career at Washington as a 3-star recruit back in 2017 already, but then put up over 9,000 passing yards over these last 3 years combined with the Bulldogs, along with 75 total touchdowns. Great timing-based thrower who routinely hits his receivers just as they come out of their breaks, showcasing an advanced level of anticipation, placing the ball away from ancillary zone defenders consistently. While being able to get to his third read with regularity, he can change up his release point, has some suddenness to him to navigate the pocket, and keeps his eyes up once he gets outside of it. At the Senior Bowl, you saw him deliver some excellent balls on the move. He certainly doesn't have prototype size or overall athleticism, I would say, and where I do question if he has legit NFL arm strength is seeing him sort of drift towards his targets rather than being able to stay on the spot and just drive the ball outside the numbers. But I think it's good enough. His pocket presence and ability to extend plays is clearly a plus, even though he may not be able to pull away from defenders on the run necessarily. To me, he could be the Brock Purdy of this draft class, and I'm talking the realistic view on him, rather than GMs just coming out and acting like that's the type of skills that you're striving for in a franchise guy, but rather a clever distributor back there who can be successful as a start in the right situation. Quarterback is usually the last position that I get deeper into, other than the top names of course, but he'll most likely end up as my QB7. Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA is a name that has been rising in this pre-draft process. DTR has a very talented arm. He actually led all quarterbacks at the combine with 62 miles per hour on his fastball. He showed continuous development at UCLA, is a legit big play threat when he decides to run, and I've always been a big fan of the incredible level of toughness that he's displayed. Consistent accuracy is something that I definitely question at this point, but I like the tools that he presents as a developmental option who has played winning football already. Next up is running back, and the name here is Eric Gray from Oklahoma, 5'10", 205 pounds, a senior. A top 200 overall recruit for Tennessee back in 2019, who flashed as part of a committee and decided to transfer to Oklahoma 2 years ago. He was the clear RB2 behind Kennedy Brooks there in 2021, who was actually a much better college back than people realize. And then Gray really took off as the main guy this past season, touching the ball 246 times for just under 1,600 yards and 11 touchdowns from scrimmage. I love the way that he uses his blocks accordingly as he sets up run schemes, where he's asked to press and then cut upfield in one motion on zone schemes, or hesitating behind lead blockers, manipulating second level defenders and combos, where he's just very deceptive with his body language, can make those subtle adjustments to where he's going and kind of weave through defenses, but also stop on the spot when needed. Once he gets through the second level and is one-on-one with a safety, he can put that guy in hell with dead legs, jump cuts, head fakes and more, consistently winning those battles. he displays outstanding curvilinear movement to accelerate while spanning his path, and then he shows great contact balance to where defenders bounce off him, and he's able to keep himself alive as a runner. You do see him get tracked down from behind, lacking the top gear to finish home runs, and the one thing he does really need to work on is keeping his eyes and chin up as he gets ready to throw his punch in pass pro, which is where blitzers are able to sidestep him at times. But he has soft hands, illustrated by 0 drops this past season, consistently is able to make the first man miss, and has been utilized as a receiver quite a bit. To me, he's an NFL starting running back, and I like him significantly better than the RB14 that is currently projected to go as. And I could have easily gone with back-to-back Bulldogs, since I love Jordan Mims from Fresno State as well. Hits the hole at full speed, super efficient with the way that he navigates through traffic, and regularly clears the second level. The one thing is, he can kick into that extra gear once he's past that point, but he was more of a passing down option actually early on in his career, and he has the confidence in his hands as well as a strong punch in pass pro to contribute on all 3 downs. And for a really deep sleeper, Toa Taua from Nevada, built super low to the ground at like 5'8", but can really unload a contact, along with being a mature decision maker and effective with his cuts, while having nearly 1,200 receiving yards in his career with the Wolfpack. Another guy who just doesn't have that breakaway speed and will surely go late, if he even gets called at all, but could absolutely find his way onto a roster as an eventual RB3. Moving on to the wide receiver position, and I don't think there's a player in this draft that I've talked about more than this kid. DeMario Douglas from Liberty, 5'8", 180 pounds, a redshirt junior. Douglas was just a 2-star recruit in 2019, but increased his production every single year with the Flames, including 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns on 84 touches this past season. Consistently comes off the ball as a vertical threat to make defenders back up, because they know he can blaze by them, not losing any speed as he glides through corner post or shake routes. But he can also make some dramatic cuts and is really good at that little head nod or tilt at the top of the route to break off DBs. He catches the ball with confidence. Obviously, he doesn't have the size to box out anybody, but he positions his body well down the field and actually hauled in 7 of 15 contested catch opportunities this past season. And then with the ball in his hands, he has some pretty electric start-stop ability, which allowed him to force a missed tackle on basically every 4th touch in 2022. He's small, and there's no way around it, with the height, weight, arm length, and hand size on the bottom 10th percentile. And what does hurt him, I believe, is the fact that he has 6 career muff punts, which is what teams considering him compared to some other receivers in that range will ask him to do. But other than that, you're really nitpicking. The way that he was smoking dudes during Shrine Bowl week, and going back to his tape, I just don't understand how he's projected to be a 7th round pick right now, unless he's completely off your board because you have some hard benchmarks in terms of size that you don't want to go below, but I personally like him in the 4th. I also considered A.T. Perry from Wake Forest here. I just think you won't find many 6'4" receivers, especially in this extremely small class. With such light feet off the line, he's a very detailed route runner who can sink his hips to efficiently get in and out of breaks. Plus then he's one of the best receivers out there in terms of winning above the rim. I have him way up there as my wide receiver 6 actually. And I'd have a couple more day 3 names in mind, but a guy that I've looked at as a pro for a couple of years now, Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State, just has a knack for creating angles for himself, very little wasted movement, uses his body well to shield the ball, reliable work in the middle of the field and fighting for extra yards, but can also box out smaller corners down the field for big plays. He made my top 10 receiver list as well last week, even though he may not blow you away with his speed. Next up, let's look at a very good tight end class, and the name I want to talk about here is Davis Allen from Clemson, 6'6", 245 pounds, a senior. One of the top 1,000 overall recruits in 2019, caught 39 passes for 443 yards and 5 touchdowns in his second season as a full-time starter last year. You saw him line up all over the formation for Clemson, in line, wing, H-back, slot, and out wide. For how tall he is, he initiates first contact in the run game with good pad level and rolls his hips through to take control whilst maintaining a wide base, stays balanced as he works up to the second level, and he's a tremendous blocker on the move, breaking down and getting his hands on DBs in space, where Clemson made it a priority to have him on the side to where he wanted to throw wide receiver screens. For a guy in the 245, 250 pound range, he's an easy mover off the ball with the speed to threaten the seams, gets low in his breaks, and was frequently asked to run option routes against linebackers and safeties. He consistently blocks the ball at his highest point, which is why he only dropped 1 of 40 catchable targets last year, and he does well to hold on to it through hits by bringing it into his frame. When matched up against true defensive ends in the run game, you do see guys pop his pads backwards if they have the length advantage, and I'd like to see him become more physical as a route runner, with not allowing defenders to widen his stem. I saw that happen too often, where he was lined up as the single receiver, and corners were able to pin him into the sideline. But he has the size you're looking for, several great catches on tape. Even in pass pro, he has some really impressive reps, where he's technically sound, stays square to his rusher and holds his ground. I'm not done with the tight ends yet, but he's number 7 or 8 for me right now, compared to outside the top 10, and in the late 5th round, according to consensus boards. Noah Gindorf from North Dakota State is a very different player, and nobody who will ever win you a fantasy championship or anything like that, but if you're looking for a tight end 2 who allows your starter to detach from the line, or you really want to add some boost to your run game out of 12 personnel, this is your guy. Heavily utilized and very effective as a true Y, executing a multitude of pro run schemes, extends for the ball away from his body, and once he gets going, tackles just kind of bounce off this dude. He simply didn't have a ton of production as a receiver, and when asked to actually go through breaks as a route runner, you saw him round those off largely, but just a very useful player if you can get him sometime on day 3. Let's get to the big boys now, and first up with the offensive tackle position with Darnell Wright from Tennessee, 6'6", 335 pounds, senior. This is probably the highest selected player ultimately from this list, as no others will likely be drafted in the first round, but I just really wanted to talk about this kid because I don't believe people realize how freaking good he actually is. This is probably by far the highest selected player ultimately from this list, as no others will likely be drafted in the first round, but I just really wanted to talk about this kid because I don't believe people realize how freaking good he actually is. Wright was the number 2 offensive tackle recruit in 2019, behind only Alabama standouts, and eventual top 10 pick for the Giants in Evan Neal. He entered the starting lineup in year 2, switched over to the left side as a junior, and finally back to his proper home on the right side this past season, when he was a first-team All-SEC selection. This young man screams power at you. The way he can sink his hips and work up through contact to great movement on angular blocks, along with the explosiveness out of his stance to cover ground in the run game for a man his size is remarkable. Shows the flexibility to keep his hands latched as defenders try to reduce the surface area and squeeze by him, and then he just engulfs smaller bodies in space. His resume as a pass protector is the very best of the class, refusing to allow the baddest man in college football in Will Anderson from Alabama to dictate reps against him, where his ability to absorb force when that guy was trying to convert speed to power really stood out. He's also shut down more diverse rushers and guys who can really bend, like LSU's BJ Ojolari. Really, there's nothing people are able to throw at him that he struggled with, which is why he didn't allow a single sack and just 8 total pressures across over 500 pass blocking snaps this last season. There's a bit of an uptick in his kick slides, and just about a quarter of his work in that regard was actually done on what PFF labels as true pass sets, with all the RPOs, screens, and so on for Tennessee. And that offense was also part in why we didn't see him impose his will and power on the run game all the time. But I just don't really see a gap between him and what is usually considered the top 3 of the class in Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, and Broderick Jones. He could also not be defeated during Senior Bowl week. This is a top 20 prospect for me all day long. And I just want to quickly throw 3 other names out here. Tyler Steen from Alabama, super consistent with his angles and hand placement in the run game, as well as the control that he plays within his pass sets. The one thing for him will be learning how to become better at stopping the initial momentum of power rushers and unlocking his massive lower half. Richard Gurage from Florida, sorry if I can't pronounce it perfectly, another guy who just gets the job done and has shown improvement each of the last 3 years, with good fluidity in his lower half and ability to secure blocks, while already mirroring rushes very well. I just like him to play a little bit stronger and be a little more proactive with his hands. And finally, Azim Richards from North Carolina, looked at as a guard by some, and I could see him move myself because of the way that he fits his hands and can roll his hips through contact in order to create movement in the run game. But he has the foot quickness to play out on the edge. He just has a bad tendency of carrying his hands low and oversetting at times that he just needs to work on. And for the final position on offense, we switch over to the interior offensive line, more specifically a guard from UCLA, Atonio Mafi, 6'3", 340 pounds, a redshirt senior, an absolute unit of a man who started his career on the defensive line, but then was a standout at left guard for the Bruins this past season. Mafi clearly has the power to create vertical movement and wash guys down the line on inside zone, but his feet are also shockingly nimble to execute scoop blocks on the backside of stretch plays, pull out to the corner or wrap around and obliterate guys in the lane as a lead blocker. You will not run through this wall in protection with his wide and strong base, packs a forceful punch to throw interior rushes off kilter, and trying to find a secondary escape route. Really good at passing off and picking up rushes on twists, with the lateral movement skills to slide in front of loopers, but also the sturdy base to swallow guys slanted towards him and just trying to open up space. I like to see him gain a little more ground vertically when he's not engaged with somebody in pass pro, so he can help out as rushes flash color to either side of him and firm up the pocket that way. And he can be a tad late with picking up the late rushes at times, especially those coming from the second level. Regardless, this is a guy who collects bodies in the run and pass game, had a tremendous Shrine Bowl week where he stoned several D tackles and just didn't lose any reps. To me, he's an early day free pick, and I just don't understand how he's currently projected, and I just don't really understand how he's currently projected to potentially not even hear his name called at all. A couple of other names I considered here: Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin, a lot high up on the board, really fun center prospect from a school that has been an O-line factory for a couple of decades by now. Very tall for the pivots, but he uses that length well to keep interior pass rushers at bay, along with playing with natural bend at his knees and tight elbows to not let his height become an issue. Plus, then he has remarkable movement skills in the run game, where he can reach block and get on those wide pulls with ease, really adding a different dimension to your playbook. And Chandler Zavala from NC State, kind of exactly what you want a guard to look like. Great lateral movement and zone concepts, strong upper half to gain control early and stay latched, whilst playing under good control when he climbs to the second level, keeps a tight grip on pass rushes, using his hands well to throw them off on the approach, and showing tremendous awareness for all kinds of games up front. He's simply not the high-level athlete that typically goes in the first couple of rounds, although he's finally starting to receive some recognition with much better numbers at his pro day than people were anticipating, after he was a massive snub for the combine, I thought, along with Mafi actually. But now let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball, where first up, let's look at the edge position with Nick Hampton from Appalachian State, 6'2", 235 pounds, senior. Just a 2-star recruit back in 2018, but became a fixture in the lineup from his second year on, and over his past 2 seasons, he's combined for 23 tackles for loss, 18 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and passes batted down each across 23 games. His frame certainly isn't up to NFL standards yet, weighing in at just 236 pounds at the combine, and he'll need to get stronger, but he already shows plenty of pop in his hands. He has exceptional short air quickness to knife inside of blockers, changes direction without much of an issue, and chases after the ball with a high rev motor. As a pass rusher, his ability to threaten up the field and flatten his rushes by flipping his hips towards the quarterback really stood out. His hand swipes are well timed and precise. He has the wiggle to shoot inside of tackles oversetting him, and he keeps working those hands as well as circle back around if he goes past the quarterback initially. Like I said, he's not a plus run defender yet, and doesn't really focus on setting a hard edge anyway, where he was allowed to freelance quite a bit. And you see that as well rushing the passer, where he worked inside quite a lot, and I'd like to see a little bit more of a power element to his rushes, but his ability to win around the corner and make blockers have to chase him is tremendous. Plus, that sudden burst also shows up when he's asked to peel off into the flats and takes away quick completions that way. I think he's worth of investing into early on day 3 as a pass rush specialist, rather than him being in the fringe 5th to 6th round range where he's currently projected to go, although I do understand that it's a very deep edge class. And there's a bunch of late round guys who I could rave about here, like Eastern Michigan's Jose Ramirez or Caleb Murphy from Ferris State, but the one name I really consider talking about here is BJ Ojulari from LSU, who for whatever reason barely ever finds his way into first round mocks. He's not overwhelming people at the point of attack, but he's become much better playing with extension and holding his ground in the run game, along with having experienced in a similar role to another former Tiger and Jaguars first round pick Kilavon Chason, where he dropped into coverage quite a bit, but it's the pass rushing mastery that he's already displayed at the collegiate level that really has me excited, with all the clubs in his bag, being able to read pass sets and string moves together, with a combination of quickness and fluidity to give NFL tackles issues right away. I think I just don't feel like people are talking about it enough. Moving on to the interior defensive line with Dante Stills from West Virginia, and I just don't get this one at all. This young man is 6'4", 285 pounds, came back for another year to West Virginia, even though he could have easily left for the draft last year, I thought. had an awesome showing during East West Shrine Week and the Combine, yet somehow he's projected to go in the 6th or 7th round. What the hell am I missing? Plenty of juice off the ball, can lock out and 2-gap, but also be a penetration style player or slant across the face of blockers to create problems. He's super active with his hands to fight off blocks, and regularly is able to create angles for himself to get to the ball carrier. In the pass game, he can right guards backwards into the quarterback's lap when he goes for the bull rush, packs an awesome swipe rip combo where he can reduce his size and corner his rushers in impressive fashion for his size, and he keeps on working, routinely yanking people to the side late as he sees the quarterback move off the spot. He gets a little too tall in the run game and spins off blocks more than I like to see, plus he needs to learn how to play under a little more control as a rusher, hitting the right aiming points of blockers, and just little things like that. But I have no idea how you don't have this kid as a top 10 tier defensive lineman. He was wrecking shit all Shrine Bowl week long, just piling up tackles for loss, and making offensive linemen look silly with how quickly he beat them during one-on-ones. Give me this kid around pick 100 any day. I also considered Keanu Benton here from Wisconsin, who played a lot of shade nose and has the worker bee mentality, but is falsely labeled as just this rocket defensive tackle, I think. This young man has some real skills to create negative plays in the run and pass game. His wrestling background really shows up in the way that he can defend the run, with quicks, leverage, and violent hands. And at Senior Bowl practices, he showed the ability to cross-face guards and turn his shoulders away from contact in order to get more clean wins as a pass rusher, which was kind of the question mark with him at times. He just needs to become a little more diverse in that regard. And just 2 more names I want to mention here. If you're looking for a guy who can really win the A-gap, there's Jerrod Clark from Coastal Carolina, while Ikenna Ojukwu from Rice has that inside versatility as an interesting disruption style player on day 3. But now let's move on to the second level of the defense, with linebacker Jeremy Banks from Tennessee, 6'1", 230 pounds, a redshirt senior. Another guy who I've been raving about this entire pre-draft process. Banks was a top 500 overall recruit in 2018, who started his career as running back before starting his last 2 years on defense, putting up 181 combined tackles, 16 of those for loss, 5.5 sacks, an interception, and 8 more passes broken up. Dude plays with a quick trick in the run game, without any hesitation to crash through one shoulder of a guard or fullback leading up into the hole. Yet he also has surprising suddenness to slip bigger opponents, and displays great lateral agility to trail runs from the backside. When he arrives at the ball carrier, he effectively brings those guys to the ground, either by shooting his hips through contact when he gets to head-on collisions, or lassoing them down to the turf from the side. In coverage, he shows plus awareness for targets around him, tracks the eyes of the quarterback, and redirects well to crowd passing windows in the hook seam area. When sent as a blitzer, you see good timing with the snap, violence in running through the face of backs, and the Vols even lined him up on the edge quite regular this past season in order to take advantage of his closing burst. NFL teams will try to take advantage of his aggressive playstyle by hitting quick glances of RPOs or catching him overflowing against zone action. He can get a little overzealous in his pursuit angles. Plus, what he still needs to work on is not getting so locked in on one target at times as his own defender. With that being said, he was by far the top linebacker during Shrine Bowl week. He tested in the 84th percentile or better in the 40 in both the jumps. He has excellent tape against SEC competition in the linebacker class that seems kinda all over the place when you look at rankings. To me, his name needs to be mentioned as an early D3 prospect. Once again, not somebody projected to go undrafted. 2 other names I quickly wanted to mention here. Ivan Pace Jr. from Cincinnati. Other than maybe Jack Campbell from Iowa, probably the best tape of any linebacker in this class this past season. His ability to play in condensed areas, the contact balance that he brings, and that ability to contort his body and kind of defeat blocks that way in the run game, along with, as a pass rusher, probably the very best blitzer in this class when it comes to linebacker position. You look at him down during the Senior Bowl, the way he was sidestepping running backs constantly, along with the power that he can bring in that regard to run through them. He's obviously an outlier in terms of size, at about 5'10" with really short arms, and wasn't tasked with much man coverage at all in his collegiate career. But another guy, I just feel like, what is wrong with this kid other than the size? Kind of reminds me of Malcolm Rodriguez last year, who was a stand-up player for the Lions right away as a rookie. And then Michael Jones from Syracuse, just somebody who has a great knack for diagnosing plays from the second level, uses his long arms very well to fight off blockers. And there's this one clip that I posted of him, trying to think who it was against right now. But the offense has the screen set up to the left side to the running back, and there's really nobody else in the picture. but he slices through that lane between a couple of blockers and actually stops it, I think for a tackle for loss, when that could have easily been a touchdown. Just some of the plays that you see like that, cleaning up for a defense. Another guy lacks some athletic traits maybe, but really, really solid player. And now we move on to the secondary with the cornerback position in Kyu Blu Kelly from Stanford, 6 foot even, 190 pounds, another senior, who's the son of an 11-year NFL veteran Brian Kelly. This young man stepped right into the footsteps of his old man, becoming a part of the starting lineup just a couple of games into his freshman campaign and logging a total of 35 career starts, over the course of which he racked up 23 pass breakups and 3 interceptions, earning back-to-back second-team All-Pac-12 nominations. Like I already mentioned in my breakdown of the top 10 corners in this draft, which he landed just outside of, I was familiar with Kelly heading into this past season, and he stood out throughout Senior Bowl week with his ability to anticipate routes and get his hands on the football. But when I put on the tape from this past season, I was pretty blown away, to be honest. I mean, he just puts out teaching tape in man coverage. Stays square with guys off the line, not letting them affect him at all with exaggerated footwork, stab with one arm once the receiver commits his release, widen his stem, stay locked on the hip, and once the guy's eyes look back for the football, get your head around. Most quarterbacks didn't even throw at him. His spatial awareness and ability to midpoint routes, whilst playing with active eyes as a zone defender, really stand out, and he's looking to support the run, disengaging from blocks and driving low as a tackler. So why isn't KBK considered a top cornerback prospect? Well, the one thing he doesn't have is great speed. He only ran a 4.52 at the combine, and you see it a little bit on film, where if receivers are able to affect him for a split second of the line, and he gets out of phase, he doesn't have the recovery burst to get back into the picture, and he hasn't picked up any passes since week 2 of 2021, which NFL teams are obviously looking for, those guys who can take the ball away. Other than that, he's an outstanding corner, and somebody I'd love for my team to select, and just plug in right away, ready to go. This is such a deep corner class, to where I wouldn't be shocked if he somehow made it to D3, but anywhere from pick 60 to 80 is, I believe, the sweet spot for him. A couple other guys that I considered here, maybe people inside NFL buildings on board with me here, who is an insanely long, twitched-up corner with excellent feet to mirror off the line, but also the springiness to drive on routes from off alignment, whilst his long arms give him extra room to get his hands on the ball if there's a little bit of separation. He just lacks a little bit of bulk in his frame and needs to learn staying on his feet as a tackler. And Nick Jones from Ball State is a kid that I really like as a deep sleeper, prototype measurements, supreme athletic confidence for being a small school prospect, does well to reroute receivers and press, but can also click and close in a hurry, good awareness for route combinations and how to position himself in zone coverage, and plays through the midst of the target exceptionally well. He does tend to flip his hips a little bit prematurely, and needs to do a better job of leaning into receivers and locating the football down the field, but he really left an impression on me during Rambo week. And for the final position, let's talk about a safety here, and one of my absolute favorites, Sidney Brown from Illinois, 5'10", 210 pounds, a senior. Somebody who's had a meteoric rise during this pre-draft process already, but I still don't believe people have elevated enough at this point. You put on the tape, and this kid is just playing with his hair on fire, accelerating into tight ends and crashing through the C-gap in the run game. He landed on the edge of the box a lot, where his ability to defeat the hands of blockers really stood out, but the Atlanta also blitzed him off the slot frequently, where he could flatten and run down ball carriers from the backside. In coverage, it's pretty astounding how light his feet are, and seemingly having his body leaned the wrong way at times as guys are getting out the breaks, and still being able to get right back into the hip pocket. He was all over tight ends throughout games because of those easy change of direction skills, and he refuses to lose because of his lack of height. It's one of the feistiest defenders you'll ever find at gaining position and raking through the catch point. The only two holdups NFL teams may have with him are the fact that he only spent 60 snaps as a deep safety last season according to PFF, and that he missed 14 of 74 tackling attempts. He simply needs to learn how to counterbalance and shoot his hips through contact to create stops reliably. Other than that, I see no reason why he shouldn't be a top 50 pick and the third or fourth safety of the board. The mindset that he plays with is outstanding. He was blanketed tight ends and many of the receivers throughout Senior Bowl week. He put up elite to borderline elite numbers at the combine, and from all accounts, everybody in league circles, as well as his teammates, seem to love this kid. He's just an awesome football player. And by the way, that Illinois secondary with him, the one Witherspoon on the outside, and Jatavius Martin at nickel was just bonkers. The other name I consider talking about here, Quindell Johnson from Memphis, just somebody I never hear anybody bring up. another prospect currently projected to go undrafted, and safety is actually my second to last position to really do deep dives on. So I don't know exactly, but I'm pretty sure at least will flirt with my top 10 for the position. He's a smooth, fluid athlete who had 4 productive seasons at Memphis in a multifaceted role. I really like the way he processes the game, anticipates and positions himself for route patterns. He sees plays develop and takes the appropriate angles, whilst being an excellent tackler in space. So really, other than maybe the high-end athletic traits missing to some degree, I just don't see why he's that far down the list, especially in this 2-deep safety world, where you don't necessarily need that true center feeling free safety, but just 2 guys who see things happen in front of them and can react to it. But that is it. My list of guys who I just fell in love with watching the tape, and mostly just don't agree with where they're currently ranked. I really enjoyed talking about them here, and feel free to put a few other names in the comments who you don't believe receive the attention that they deserve, or just what you think of my list. For now though, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and hitting the subscribe button if you haven't yet. Plus, as you can probably tell, I'm investing way more time than anybody with a day job usually should or even can do. So if you like my work and could share it with a couple of people you know, that would really mean the world to me. As I already mentioned in the intro, all my position rankings will be up on hellofootballtalk.com, which I'm a little over halfway through at the point that this comes out. Go check those out before I present my top 100 big board and finish up with my final mock draft. Plus then of course I'll recap the entire draft once it's over, talk about some undrafted free agent signings I believe could make an impact, and then go through all the individual divisions to give all 32 teams time to talk about their draft classes and overall build of the roster. That's still pretty far ahead though, and I hope you're with me on this ride going forward. Once again, links are down below in the video description for my page and my social media handles. So until then, see you later. Peace!